Fantastic, great. So, Richard Brandt. So I just want to, Richard, like many New Yorkers, is a guy who moved from New York to Tennessee to the South. And can I just ask you? It's a simple question. What is Nashville's mayor like?
Air is being looked at by conservatives for
He's not conservative enough. Yeah,
that's
very liberal. Well, we're moving. New York's becoming more liberal too. So, yeah. So talk about your background. Let's make sure. Let's turn it on. Perfect. Great. Yep.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
There you go.
Yeah, so I was, many of you know, I was a hedge fund portfolio manager. And after making investments and serving on the board and directing and hoping management would do the right thing, I concluded, looking around the room, that I could improve my alpha by going in-house as a CFO. And so that's what I've done the last number of years. And if you bring my experience in-house as a CFO, apparently it leads to one opportunity after the other.
Yeah, I mean, especially for a guy like you in a space like healthcare, right? I mean, because you're Chicago MBA, hedge fund space forever. I met you through Nancy Seltzer, I think, maybe 100 years ago, right?
That's right.
So
Yeah.
when you were just 1 or 2 years old.
Talking about longevity.
Yeah, right. We like longevity, right? So, what's really interesting is you are in the middle of a topic that we talk about all the time, which is, we've had a bunch of women come on and talk about, once you get for 45 years or older, body changes, you have a lot of pain that happens from that. Obviously, we had the opioid crisis. Um, I'm a recreational tennis player. Pain is like the number one thing I ever experience in life.
Yeah.
So pain management's a big deal. Talk to us about, how you're dealing with pain management, what your strategy is, and the company you're involved with now.
Yeah. So our strategy is to take a lot of risk out of biotech investing. We're taking a playbook that's been used by Bristol Myers and others, Cadence, throughout the years. Many investors are aware. Of course, most drugs are developed here, but every once in a while, a drug slips through the cracks, is not used here, but is used extensively in Europe. And that's what we're doing. We've identified a drug in Europe, first authorized in 1976, used extensively, 199 million prescriptions a year in 22 countries, and we're bringing it here. So there's decades of use data. There's decades of data on how effective it is. It's equivalent to morphine. It's equivalent to fentanyl, a strong opioid, but it doesn't work that way. So it doesn't have the addictive features, and it's very tolerable. So we have all that data. And now, of course, in the US FDA says, well, we view it as a new entity. Fine. I mean, that means I need to spend some money to go through the process. We've gone through animal studies, phase 1, our safety data is clean, and now we move into phase 2. The good news is then we get new molecular entity status and market exclusivity for at least 5 years post-authorization. So from an investor point of view, it's a great trade. Small amount of investment into phase 2 and phase 3, and then 5 years of market exclusivity. I'll take that trade.
And I think this is like a known strategy. I mean, you're not the first person who said, great, I'm going to take a drug from Europe, get exclusivity on it, expand the patent base. And so it's a tried and true method.
Bristol Myers and my founder did this years and years ago with a drug. It got authorized. It had a black box warning, but nevertheless, 5 years later, they had a $4 billion top line for that year. Another example in the pain category, we know in New Jersey, Johnson & Johnson owns Tylenol when we take it orally, but the IV was not in the US. So Cadence company brought it over from Europe, got it authorized, and sold their company for $1.3 billion. So investors are pretty familiar with this model, and it's a risk mitigated approach to drug development.
Yeah, fantastic, great. And so I was hoping that you could just expand a little bit on the issue of pain and the number of people. So like yesterday, we got a number like 50 million people in the United States have COPD, for example. How many people in the United States suffer from some sort of pain where they require some kind of a treatment on a regular or irregular basis?
I think the number's something like 125 million.
Okay.
There's really two markets. There's acute pain. So if somebody goes in for back surgery or some other form of surgery, you need to treat that pain acute. Our drug is used first line treatment in France for surgery. And then there's chronic pain. Nothing associated with surgery, but something that's an ongoing situation. It's faster and quicker and easier, less expensive to get approval from the FDA for acute pain. So that's what everybody does first. And then you use your cash flow to generate authorization for the chronic pain trials, which are a little bit longer and as a result, a little bit more expensive.
Yeah, I think that Fred Nasm, there's an aspect to Rejuvenon that's looking at pain management as well. So I think it's just a known condition. Jay Fisher also has another venture in the pain management area. But the tracking of the data is not great. And yeah,
And in contrast, that's what we have. We have over 40 years of data of how effective it is, how safe it is, how non-addictive it is. So that's a big head start for us to potentially get accelerated approval process from the FDA.
And I think when it comes to women's health, there's just a whole bunch of stuff that's never been explored. I mean, it's just been ignored for years and years. Once you get over 45 years old, it's like the old. I think there was like a TV show once, and as you know, I live with a doctor, and the guy says, "I got this condition." Blah blah. Blah. I says, "Well, nothing I can do for you. You're 50 years old, right? Just live with it, right?" And then my partner starts laughing, right? That's not funny. So pain is a big deal. We have a whole group of investors out of Arizona who are really focused on that as well, and out of California. They're not as active here, but I mean, there's a real application not just in what you're doing, but almost as a femtech,
Yeah,
solution.
and we're heavy on science. We have a great doctor who's on staff at Harvard, the preeminent pain expert in the world. We have another medical doctor who's gotten 6 drugs approved, knows how to design a clinical trial. Another staff member, over 10 drugs approved. But we're basing this on the data, and even though the U.S. has tried now for 10 years to reduce the use of opioids, we're still spending $40 billion a year here in the U.S. on opioids. And way back when I had a bulging disc and I got Vicodin, I think it was, or Viax. I got Viax. And they took Viax off the market because it kills your kidneys. Well, so does Tylenol, right? And in the U.S., we have super strength Tylenol and those kind of drugs, and we have opioids at the other end. And as I looked at this market, it just struck me as an odd barbell strategy for pain management. And that's where, our drug can fill in the gap. Now, we've improved and optimized the formulation to make it longer lasting, to reduce the maximum amount in your bloodstream, but maintain the rapid onset. And as a result, the U.S. Patent Office has given us 5 patents already and more pending. So we're protecting our investor base, including myself, but we're also going to be bringing to the FDA a safer, longer lasting drug.
And can you talk about the side effects? I mean, you said that it still has the same speed. It's not an opiate, right?
It's
So
not
there's
an
no
opioid.
addictive. Is
So-
there addictive nature? Can you talk about that?
So it works on a different way, but there's something called dopamine. We touch dopamine very lightly, but all throughout the decades, people comment that they have a general sense of well-being, but not a high like you would get from an addict. So there's no desire to go back. Oh, I need some more of this to get that high again. So that's good. We did our phase 1's trial for safety. We did single ascending doses up to 240 megs. We're not going to do that commercially. There was no adverse effects. We did multiple ascending doses up to 240. There were no adverse effects until we hit 240. And then we got some nervousness, we got some nausea, dizziness, and lightheadedness. But so we demonstrated where the ceiling is, where we can bring it up to, and we're going to go nowhere near that. But that's the kind of adverse effects that we've seen. And fortunately, our study was just as we expect, given the nature of this drug and the decades of history with the drug.
Well, do you know if it's used in athletic events in Europe at all, or things like that, or?
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
excellent.
So it's in the UK, like 57 million doses in a 12-month period, and it's a tablet form. But they only have it in a 30 meg. And so when it's prescribed, the doctors tell you to take it 3 to 4 times a day and take 3 or 4 pills at each time. So there's a heavy pill burden. And one of the things we're trying to do is make this a twice a day drug, so make it easier for the consumer and the patient.
Right, right. So let's go through like your typical VC due diligence, et cetera. So you said been issued 5 patents,
5 patents.
and you have more that so you're building up a whole patent platform around this, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about that and like what your strategy is on the patent side.
Yeah.
We've got a patent attorney right over there,
Right,
so.
exactly. Well, we've both forms of patents, composition of matter and mechanism, and so we have 5 issued, 1 pending, and we have generated extra data, but we're holding that in reserve to file closer to when we get authorization from the FDA, so we don't have that clock ticking. But we also have that new molecular entity protection, which is market exclusivity. And that starts on the day we get authorized. And that's at least 5 years, but there's a couple features where you can extend it possibly out to 8 years. So our first patent expires September 37. So we have a lot of protection for ourselves, myself, and investors.
And so talk about like other drugs and the precedents about them, and any kind of comps you might have in
Yeah.
terms of
So
how they've been treated in
there-
this sector in the industry.
Yeah, there's been like a desert of no development in this category for years and years and years because the Purdue company who was bringing opioids was really effective at marketing, really effective at de-emphasizing the addictive nature, and opioids do work, right? So doctors were comfortable giving opioids to people, so they hit the mission, but unfortunately they cause addiction. So now, more recently, there has been a little bit more development. So Vertex, the public company whose big power alley is cystic fibrosis, they've now done 4 approaches to bring a non-opioid. The 4th finally got authorized by the US FDA, but it's curious. It had impact of action 2.5 hours in one arm of phase 3 and 3.5 hours in another arm. That's not market. For acute pain, you need something in less than an hour. So maybe that'll be used for chronic pain. And curiously, it failed compared to the placebo, and it failed compared to a weak comparator arm, which was a weak opioid. So we're not too concerned about that. Curiously, they use a different mechanism. So if a doctor wanted to give that and ours to a patient, it's ethical to do so. But nevertheless, once they got approved, their $100 billion market cap increased 20% to $20 billion. So
Wow.
investors have woken up and they're smelling the coffee. There's another private company a half a step ahead of us out in California called Latigo. Investors valued them at $520 million. And then there's a third company, Site One, and Latigo is using the same mechanism as Vertex. The third one is Site One, also been around 15 years using the same mechanism that Vertex is, and they just got acquired by Lilly for $1 billion, 450 million of which was up front. This is Lilly's 5th acquisition of a non-opioid. 2 of those programs they've suspended because they just were theories that didn't work. But the first 4 were for $2 billion, and now this most recent one was for $1 billion. They are replowing the money they're making on weight loss into this category.
So is it possible they underestimate the size of this pain market? I mean, 40 billion is big.
Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of people don't want to take opioids, right? So
Well, if 40 billion is opioids alone.
yes, that's what I'm saying,
so
right?
if you add in
Extra strength Tylenol
and everything else, it's a much bigger market. Yeah, it's a huge market, and with the aging U.S. population, it's just growing.
Exactly, right, right. So that's very interesting. So
we have the capacity to for some patients completely eliminate the need for an opioid, or to reduce the amount or the duration they're on opioids, which would decrease the risk that somebody becomes addicted.
And opioids are highly regulated now, right?
Yeah.
So again, I was at a doctor's conference just before COVID, and in California, there's like a 2-week maximum prescription
Yeah.
for opioids that you can write,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's
And
right.
I think in Connecticut, it's around the same.
Yeah.
And then I was told by a lot of doctors from California that if you write prescriptions for cannabis related, it's free for all. But if you're writing a prescription and it's for 2 weeks and you want to get it renewed or extended, you have to provide all kinds of new documentation
Yeah.
on why you're doing it and why you're giving this person an opioid. So it's really in the conscience of America, of like, hey, what are you doing? Why are you doing it?
Yeah.
Et cetera. And what people don't also realize, there's a lot of people who doctor shop and try to do pills, get a backlog of pills. And I think now insurance takes it. I wanted to ask you also, you
Yeah,
said,
and our drug is not a scheduled drug in any one of the 22 countries,
wow, wow.
in contrast to opioids. And if you study opioid epidemic in the U.S., you see it's highly focused in certain states, like one state, and then the next state doesn't have so much. And it's because the one state that doesn't have it has regulated doctor prescription. The other state adjoining it has been a free for all. So it's really um, regulation has had some impact on the addiction.
Yeah, so it's super interesting. So I wanted to kind of get into more details about your company,
Yeah.
like the last valuation, how much has been invested in, has there been any grant money? Obviously, you're sitting on top of
Yeah.
something that's widely used in Europe, right?
Yeah.
So if you can just go through the
Sure.
details of that and how
We
much you're raising and the valuation.
we've raised only 18 million, 18 million through the life of our company. We have another 1.2 million scheduled for closing right after July 4th. Um, I valued our company at 75 million pre, even though I had orders at twice that. And I did that because, people were concerned about Trump tariffs, and I wanted this to go fast and not waste a lot of time of my scientists and my management because we're moving from phase 1 to phase 2. Well, that was Friday a few weeks ago. I wired my money in, my CEO wired his money in, and then that following Monday was when that acquisition was announced from Lilly at $1 billion. So I said, hey, we should fire the CFO. He mispriced the deal. Well, that's me, right? But the view was we're going after such a big market. We're going to make so much money on this. This is over a 20-bagger opportunity. My ego's not tied up on what valuation we're selling our stock right now. Let's just get the money and do it. The cool thing is that if people in the audience have invested in cancer, as I have, cancer trials are long and expensive. Pain trials are fast and inexpensive. You're usually studying a patient or subject for 48 hours. In some cases, if you're taking teeth out, 24 hours. So it's fast, and as a result, we can do these trials pretty inexpensively. Like phase 2 is $5.5 million, and I don't know anybody can do that in cancer.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about your timetable to exit. What does that look like?
Well, I mean, I know Lilly. My doctor at Harvard knows different people at Lilly. We made a decision not to go to Lilly, and Teva's also made acquisitions, not to go to Lilly until we complete this phase 2, which will be at the end of this year. But at that time, we'll be worth more. We have an audit ready for 2024, 2023. I've written a business section for S1. We will be ready for an IPO if we have a melt up, if the market's stronger, in the fall, but I'm not counting on that. Whenever I talk to a bank every other day, they say, you're an M&A candidate. And so this time next year, I'll probably be looking for a new job or flipping hamburgers at McDonald's, but we'll probably be taken out by then.
So you're saying a best case of 12 months.
Yeah, well, faster because the trial happens, we get it done, we write it up, and
What's
yeah.
your worst case?
Oh, the worst.
Because we don't like to be overly
I
optimistic.
mean, the worst case is we just go through this process. We get no accelerated approval. We get authorized in 2028, and we're cash flow positive in year 1, and we pay back all of our investment. We get like 150 million first year revenue, and that's go up to a $2 billion revenue from one indication 8 years later.
Fantastic, Rich.
Yeah.
Well, listen, this is great. Do we have any questions from the audience? I've got time for one question. Parting thoughts, Rich.
Thank you very much.
Oh, that's the best. Thank you, Rich. Thanks. All right.